In March of 1978, at a security conference in Lisbon, a Belgian NATO officer met a man who wasn't who he claimed to be. What followed was not a simple encounter, but the calculated culmination of months of observation, of grievances catalogued, and vulnerabilities meticulously charted by an unseen hand. In the heart of the Cold War, when the world held its breath between two superpowers, betrayal wasn't always a dramatic defection. Sometimes it began with a quiet conversation, a shared grievance, and the insidious whisper of purpose, turning an asset against his own alliance. Before we delve into this tangled web, tell us in the comments below, from where in the world are you watching this story unfold? To understand how one man became a weapon against the West, we must go back to a city of sun and shadows, in the spring of 1978. The reverberations of Günther Guillaume's betrayal in 1974 had long settled into the institutional memory of West German intelligence. The scandal, which saw a senior aide to Chancellor Willy Brandt exposed as an East German spy, had shaken the very foundations of the Federal Republic, causing widespread paranoia and leading to a significant overhaul of security protocols across NATO. For many within the Atlantic Alliance, it was a stark, brutal lesson in vulnerability. Yet, as the intelligence services of the West moved to patch the cracks exposed by Guillaume, few understood that the KGB viewed these very fissures not as weaknesses to be exploited directly, but as opportunities for a far more insidious and patient campaign. 4 years later, in 1978, the stage was set for another act of profound compromise. At the heart of this unfolding drama was Henri Clovis, a Belgian NATO officer. By his 52nd year, Clovis embodied a particular type of professional tragedy. He was undeniably brilliant, meticulous in his work, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of Iberian affairs, a specialization that had become indispensable to NATO's high command following the Carnation Revolution in Portugal. His analyses of regional stability, assessments of political currents, and detailed reports on military capabilities were considered invaluable. Despite this, his career had stalled, while less competent colleagues, often those with well-connected surnames or a penchant for political maneuvering, ascended the hierarchy. Clovis remained in technical roles, buried under layers of reports that, he often suspected, were rarely read by those who mattered. This professional stagnation fueled a deep-seated bitterness. Clovis had dedicated decades of his life to the alliance, to what he believed was a cause of collective defense and democratic integrity. Yet the system, as he perceived it, had consistently overlooked him, rewarding mediocrity and political expediency over genuine merit. His personal life offered little solace. A recent acrimonious divorce from Catherine Lefebvre in 1977 had left him emotionally drained and financially strained, with gambling debts steadily accumulating. His disillusionment was profound, extending beyond his personal career frustrations to a growing cynicism about the very principles NATO claimed to uphold. He saw hypocrisy in the West's pronouncements, questioning whether the alliance truly championed democracy or merely served corporate and American geopolitical interests. This fertile ground of resentment and intellectual skepticism was precisely what Colonel Vladimir Petrov, a 47-year-old veteran of the KGB's Directorate S, had been ordered to cultivate. Petrov, whose operation had been personally sanctioned by Yuri Andropov, then 64 and director of the KGB, was a master of what the Soviets termed recruitment by conviction. He had spent months meticulously profiling Clovis, delving into his professional history, his personal vulnerabilities, and his ideological leanings. He knew about the stagnant career, the recent divorce, the burgeoning debts. But Petrov was not interested in crude blackmail. His approach was far more sophisticated, relying on a psychological seduction tailored to Clovis's specific grievances. The initial encounter took place in March 1978 at a security conference reception in Lisbon. Petrov, operating under the carefully constructed alias of Miguel Suarez, a history professor from the University of Coimbra with a keen interest in international relations, approached Clovis. Their initial conversations revolved around geopolitics, the complexities of the Iberian Peninsula, and broader critiques of perceived American imperialism. Petrov, disguised as Suarez, subtly guided these discussions, echoing Clovis's own criticisms of NATO's structural inefficiencies and challenging the moral legitimacy of Western foreign policy. For Clovis, starved of intellectual engagement and validation, these conversations were like pure oxygen. Here, finally, was someone who listened, someone who took his ideas seriously, someone who seemed to understand the frustrations that gnawed at him daily. Petrov never mentioned espionage, never offered money, never made threats. He simply cultivated an intellectual friendship, validating Clovis's every frustration, amplifying every resentment, and carefully building a sense of shared purpose. It was a classic KGB technique, to make the target feel that, at last, someone understood him, that his insights finally held real weight. The turning point arrived in June 1978. Clovis was once again passed over for a well-deserved promotion. The position instead granted to a French officer with half his experience, but, crucially, the right political connections. The individual in question was a protégé with ties that reached General Jean-Baptiste Mercier, Clovis's 58-year-old direct superior in Brussels, whose influence often played a more significant role in promotions than actual merit. The humiliation was profound, publicly confirming Clovis's long-held suspicion that competence was secondary to political patronage within the alliance. During a quiet dinner in Lisbon, Petrov, as Miguel Suarez, made his move. He listened patiently as Clovis recounted the latest career slight, his voice laced with a raw, barely contained fury. Petrov suggested, with a tone of profound sympathy, that perhaps the real issue wasn't competence at all, but rather loyalty to a very specific, unquestioning transatlantic project. He posited that officers who dared to question certain policies, even subtly, were systematically marginalized, sidelined until their voices faded into obscurity. Then, he presented an alternative, a path for Clovis to finally make a real difference. He suggested that Clovis could ensure that dissenting voices, those critical of NATO's more aggressive policies, reached ears that could promote genuine dialogue, perhaps even facilitate a path to peace. Petrov argued, with persuasive calm, that the KGB did not seek to destroy the West, but merely to avert nuclear war through a better, more nuanced mutual understanding between the superpowers. It was a sophisticated deception, of course, but it was a deception Clovis, in his desperate search for meaning and validation, was ready to believe. By August 1978, the transition was complete. On a secluded stretch of the Portuguese coast, without ceremony or signed documents, Henry Clovis agreed. The agreement was entirely verbal, the method of future contact a coded system of commercial correspondence. His first delivery was immediate. Documents pertaining to NATO's integrated command structure in the Mediterranean region, information Clovis had access to through his extensive work on Iberian affairs. Petrov, as Miguel Suarez, paid $20,000, deposited into a Swiss account. Psychological analyses later indicated that Clovis accepted the money not primarily out of financial need, but because it finally, unequivocally, validated his importance. Someone, finally, was paying a fortune for the knowledge and insights that NATO, his own alliance, had consistently deemed irrelevant. The quiet exchange on the windswept coast marked the beginning of a profound betrayal, one that would ripple through the very heart of Western defense for years to come. With the verbal agreement sealed on the Portuguese coast in August 1978, Henry Clovis's transformation from embittered NATO officer to active intelligence asset began in earnest. The KGB, recognizing the extraordinary potential of their new recruit, internally classified him as a gold source, a designation reserved for agents of immense strategic value, those capable of penetrating the highest echelons of enemy intelligence. His existing position within NATO's Brussels headquarters afforded him unparalleled access, a reality that quickly began to yield dividends for Moscow. Clovis, now 52, moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE, with a quiet, almost imperceptible efficiency that had long characterized his professional demeanor. He remained the diligent, slightly unremarkable specialist, churning out exhaustive reports and attending a myriad of meetings with an air of detached professionalism. This very discretion, coupled with the long-standing perception of his career's stagnation, a bureaucrat content with his niche, served as an impeccable camouflage. No one, from junior staff reviewing his administrative requests to senior commanders, briefly acknowledging his presence in briefing rooms, suspected that the precise, meticulous officer they knew was systematically compromising the alliance's most sensitive secrets. His colleagues saw a man perpetually occupied with technical minutiae, reliable but hardly charismatic, a figure whose very lack of ambition in the social hierarchy made him appear utterly harmless. He was the quintessential gray man, blending seamlessly into the bureaucratic landscape. His access was extensive, almost dizzying in its scope. From his desk, Clovis reviewed documents detailing contingency plans for regional conflicts across Europe, outlining NATO's strategic responses to a hypothetical Soviet thrust into West Germany, or an escalation in the volatile Mediterranean theater. He meticulously studied comprehensive evaluations of the Warsaw Pact's military capabilities, including granular assessments of Soviet tank divisions, Air Force deployments, and naval strength in the Black Sea and Baltic. This was not merely data. It was intelligence critical for understanding the potential adversary's operational doctrine, readiness levels, and perceived weaknesses. Beyond these technical and tactical assessments, Clovis attended high-level strategic discussions, gleaning invaluable insights into NATO's collective decision-making processes, its internal political divisions, and the underlying currents shaping Western defense policy. He noted the subtle shifts in tone from national delegations, the points of contention, and the consensus built behind closed doors. The $20,000, meticulously deposited into a Swiss account by Petrov, served as a constant, tangible validation of his newfound importance, a stark contrast to the perceived indifference and underappreciation of his NATO superiors. It was a concrete affirmation that his intellect, his insights, and his knowledge truly mattered to someone. The true strategic value of Clovis, however, became catastrophically clear in February 1979. He received an assignment that would place him at the epicenter of one of the most critical geopolitical flashpoints of the late Cold War. Clovis was designated to a special committee tasked with evaluating the implementation of Pershing TOPAZ, medium-range ballistic missiles in Western Europe. For the Soviet Union, the deployment of the Pershing II represented an existential threat of unprecedented magnitude. Unlike earlier intermediate-range missiles, the Pershing II boasted a much shorter flight time and highly accurate guidance systems. From proposed launch sites in West Germany, these missiles could strike targets deep within the Soviet Union, including Moscow itself, in less than 10 minutes. This drastically reduced the warning time available to Soviet leadership, raising the terrifying prospect of a decapitating first strike and fundamentally altering the strategic balance of power. The Western rationale, championed by figures like then-Chasseur General Alexander Haig, was to counter the Soviet deployment of SS-20 missiles and to demonstrate NATO's resolve. But for the Soviets, understanding the precise parameters of this deployment was not merely a matter of military intelligence, it was a matter of national survival. Clovis found himself immersed in a torrent of highly classified information related to this deployment. He attended technical briefings that delved into the missile's capabilities, warhead designs, guidance systems, and operational parameters. He reviewed comprehensive strategic impact assessments prepared by NATO's top analysts, evaluations that were directly relevant to senior military figures such as General Alexander Haig, then 53 years old and a commanding presence in NATO's strategic planning. Haig, as the ultimate authority for NATO's operational planning, would be the primary recipient and user of the strategic insights Clovis was now acquiring. Clovis meticulously documented planned transport routes for the Pershing II across Europe, from their arrival ports to their designated launch bases, along with the detailed security protocols designed to protect those very bases from sabotage or reconnaissance. He learned the exact locations, the proposed timelines for deployment, and the vulnerabilities identified by NATO's own security experts. To capture this deluge of sensitive material, the KGB had provided Clovis with a Minox camera. This marvel of miniaturized engineering, no larger than a cigarette lighter, could photograph entire documents onto microscopic negatives with surprising clarity. Clovis mastered its use, concealing it within the lining of his coat, a hollowed-out book, or amongst his seemingly innocuous office supplies. In the quiet solitude of his office, often late at night after most other personnel had departed, he would methodically photograph stacks of documents, the faint, almost imperceptible click of the shutter barely audible in the silence. Each flash of the Minox was a calculated risk, a direct act of betrayal that, for Clovis, was framed as a contribution to a higher understanding, to dialogue genuine. The collection of this intelligence was executed through an ingenious system of dead drops, a classic espionage technique designed to minimize direct contact and drastically reduce the risk of compromise. These locations were carefully selected for their characteristics: high pedestrian traffic to provide cover, multiple escape routes for the collecting agent, and the practical impossibility of continuous, undetected surveillance. Clovis never met his handlers face-to-face after that initial formative agreement in Portugal. The operational protocols were stringent, designed to create maximum plausible deniability. One such dead drop was a specific, weathered park bench in the Vondelpark in Amsterdam. Clovis, feigning leisure during a brief work trip, would leave a folded newspaper on the bench, the Minox film carefully tucked into its spine, secured by a piece of tape. Days later, a different individual, an anonymous figure in the bustling park, would retrieve it. Another point of exchange was a specific telephone booth located near the Prater in Vienna, where a small sealed envelope containing film would be affixed discreetly beneath a worn shelf with a piece of chewing gum. In Brussels, closer to Clovis's daily routine, a particular public restroom near the Grand Place served as another location. Material would be deposited, sealed in a waterproof container, within the cistern of a toilet, only to be retrieved hours later by a seemingly ordinary tourist. Each drop was preceded by a coded signal, a prearranged phrase in a classified advertisement, or a specific anomaly in a widely published financial report, confirming the delivery window. The responsibility for collecting these crucial packages fell to Dmitry Volkov, a 35-year-old KGB officer whose specific task was to operate these dead drops. Volkov, a veteran of numerous clandestine assignments, moved with a practiced anonymity through the bustling cities of Western Europe, a ghost in plain sight. His task was demanding, requiring acute observational skills, nerves of steel, and an almost clinical adherence to protocol. He would retrieve the film, often under the watchful eye of countless unwitting passers-by, and ensure its secure transit back to Moscow, usually via diplomatic pouch or another secure channel. He was a small, vital cog in a much larger, highly compartmentalized machine. Indeed, the operation, codenamed Topaz, was protected by an extreme degree of compartmentalization within the KGB itself. Clovis was known only by his codename, Topaz, in all operational files, a practice designed to prevent collateral damage in the event of defection or capture elsewhere in the network. Only 3 officers within the entire KGB hierarchy were privy to his true identity, Colonel Vladimir Petrov among them, maintaining a tightly guarded secret at the apex of Soviet intelligence. The intelligence he provided was deliberately rewritten, paraphrased, and presented as originating from multiple, disparate sources before circulating within Soviet intelligence analyses. This rigorous masking of his identity was a critical measure, almost a premonition of future threats, ensuring that even if one segment of the Soviet network were compromised, Topaz himself would remain invisible, a shadow operating unimpeded within the very heart of the Western Alliance. It was a safeguard that, unbeknownst to Clovis or his handlers, would prove invaluable to the remarkable longevity of his career as a spy. Between 1980 and 1981, the clandestine world of Cold War espionage was rocked by a series of events that sent shockwaves through both East and West. A massive wave of arrests swept across Europe, systematically dismantling Soviet intelligence networks in what became known as one of the greatest operational disasters for the KGB in decades. The catalyst for this extensive damage was a KGB defector based in Vienna, whose detailed revelations provided Western counterintelligence agencies with an invaluable roadmap to Moscow's clandestine operations. Over a period of 18 months, more than 40 Soviet agents were apprehended across 6 different European nations. Diplomats, often operating under deep cover, were expelled en masse, their covers irrevocably blown. Entire networks of informants, painstakingly cultivated over years, were exposed and rendered useless. The scale of the compromise was unprecedented, forcing the KGB into a defensive posture and prompting a frantic reassessment of their operational security. The atmosphere within Western intelligence agencies was one of frenetic activity, a relentless drive to exploit the defectors' information and unravel every thread of the Soviet web. Amidst this chaos, as Western counterintelligence intensified its investigations, searching for any lingering Soviet assets, Henry Clovis remained untouchable. His operational codename, Topaz, known only to 3 individuals within the entire KGB hierarchy, proved to be his ultimate shield. Colonel Vladimir Petrov, the architect of his recruitment, had ensured such extreme compartmentalization that even the defectors' extensive knowledge of Soviet networks offered no clue to Topaz's true identity. The intelligence Clovis provided was routinely sanitized, rewritten, and presented as originating from multiple anonymous sources before being circulated within the Kremlin. This rigorous masking, a testament to the KGB's valuation of their gold source, ensured Clovis's survival in a period when countless others fell. Furthermore, Clovis's almost deliberate invisibility within the NATO structure proved to be a critical component of his longevity. He was neither flamboyant nor ambitious in a way that would attract undue attention. He remained the diligent, reliable, slightly unremarkable specialist, his bureaucratic dedication blending seamlessly into the background. While counterintelligence efforts across Europe were focused on the more conventional forms of espionage, diplomatic cover, tradecraft errors, and overt surveillance, Clovis's subtle ideological recruitment and his methodical, almost pedestrian information gathering did not fit the traditional profiles of a high-value spy. Despite the broad success in dismantling Soviet networks, concerns within Western intelligence remained, particularly regarding the Pershing II missile program. Early in 1981, Klaus Weber, a 44-year-old agent from the German Federal Intelligence Service, BND, began to raise flags. Weber, a specialist in Soviet military doctrine, noticed an unsettling accuracy in Soviet public statements and internal assessments concerning the Pershing II. While some general information about the missiles was publicly known, the specificity of Soviet data, particularly regarding deployment timelines, proposed base locations, and certain technical specifications, suggested a leak of considerable depth. "They know too much, too fast," Weber had reportedly stated in an internal BND memo, expressing his unease. His suspicions, though initially fragmented and lacking a specific target, contributed to a growing, generalized anxiety within NATO's security apparatus about potential penetrations. The focus was on what was being leaked, not yet who was leaking it. For 6 complete years, from his recruitment in August 1978 to March 1984, Henry Clovis operated with extraordinary effectiveness, continuously siphoning classified intelligence from the heart of the Western Alliance. Over this period, he compromised thousands of documents. His contribution severely impacted NATO's nuclear defense strategies, exposing vulnerabilities in command and control, revealing technical capabilities of advanced weapon systems, and laying bare intricate contingency plans for various regional conflicts. Post-operation assessments by NATO counterintelligence would later classify the strategic damage inflicted by Clovis as comparable to, perhaps even exceeding, that caused by notorious Soviet moles like Kim Philby during the earlier phases of the Cold War. Philby, a flamboyant and high-profile defector, had caused significant disruption, but Clovis, through his consistent, systematic access to high-level strategic information during a period of acute superpower tension, arguably provided intelligence of greater immediate operational value. Yet even as his treachery reached these historic proportions, Clovis's apparent professional mediocrity and his self-effacing demeanor continued to function as his most potent disguise, keeping him above suspicion. His colleagues described him as hard-working, methodical, perhaps a little dull, but undeniably loyal and utterly dedicated. This perception was his most effective cloak. However, every espionage operation, regardless of its sophistication or the agent's discipline, carries within it the germ of its own destruction. For Henri Clovis, this germ manifested itself in the most banal and seemingly insignificant form: overconfidence. By March 1984, having operated for years without incident, having survived the widespread purges of 1980-81, and having grown accustomed to the seemingly infallible security protocols of his Soviet handlers, Clovis began to take shortcuts. The meticulous, time-consuming process of photographing documents with his Minox camera, then discreetly depositing the film in dead drops across Europe, had become tiresome. He rationalized that the risk was minimal, the volume of material substantial, and his own position so secure. One late Tuesday afternoon in March 1984, Clovis had a stack of classified reports that needed to be copied. These were standard NATO secret documents, but crucial nonetheless, pertaining to an upcoming logistical exercise in Germany. Instead of using the Minox, or employing one of the more laborious but secure copying methods specified by the KGB, he decided to utilize his own office printer. It was a small, seemingly insignificant shortcut, the kind of decision that seasoned, paranoid operators instinctively avoid, but which increasingly confident and complacent agents eventually begin to make. He chose his moment carefully. Late in the day, when most of his section had already left, he fed the documents into the machine, watching the copies emerge, the whirring sound echoing slightly in the quiet office. What Clovis did not account for was the meticulous nature of the NATO security technicians. Pierre Dubois, a 39-year-old Belgian security technician, was responsible for managing and auditing the highly sensitive office equipment within Clovis's section. Dubois' job was monotonous, often overlooked, but critical. His routine included monitoring paper consumption, toner levels, and machine maintenance logs for all devices handling classified material. Later that week, during a routine audit of paper supplies in Clovis's department, Dubois noticed an anomaly. a specific ream of classified paper, designated for limited distribution documents and bearing a distinct watermark, showed a usage pattern that was inconsistent with the department's official records. It wasn't a large discrepancy, perhaps only a dozen sheets, and it was not immediately obvious, but it was enough to trigger a low-level flag in Dubois' methodical mind. He cross-referenced the paper usage with the printer's internal logs, noting the timestamps of the copies made. The quantity, while small, did not match any documented official copying requests. This seemingly trivial observation, this anomalous use of classified paper, initiated a discreet audit of Clovis's activities. It was a bureaucratic ripple, almost imperceptible at first, but it was the first tangible thread that Western counterintelligence would pull. The germ of Topaz's destruction, sown by its own agents' overconfidence, had finally begun to sprout. The end of Henri Clovis's audacious career as a Soviet spy was now irrevocably in motion. The anomaly noted by Pierre Dubois, the 39-year-old Belgian security technician, regarding Henri Clovis's office printer, proved to be the pivotal thread that initiated the unraveling of Operation TOPAZ. What started as a routine audit quickly escalated into a full-scale counterintelligence investigation. By early April 1984, Dubois' findings had reached Robert Davidson, the 51-year-old head of American counterintelligence at NATO. Davidson recognized the discrepancy's potential significance and authorized immediate, covert surveillance on Clovis, coordinating a joint task force with Belgian internal security and alliance military intelligence personnel. For weeks, Clovis was subjected to intensive scrutiny. He was shadowed, his communications monitored, and electronic surveillance was deployed in his home and office. Yet, the surveillance yielded little direct evidence of espionage. Clovis maintained his disciplined routine, exhibiting no overt signs of active engagement with handlers or suspicious activities. His professional composure, a long-standing trait, made him an exceptionally difficult target for traditional counterintelligence methods. Investigators noted his almost robotic adherence to routine, which only intensified their suspicion that they were dealing with a highly trained and careful operative. Despite the absence of a smoking gun, a more insidious pattern emerged from Clovis's aggregated access logs within NATO's secure systems. Over the preceding 6 years, he had systematically accessed documents and strategic briefings on dozens of topics unrelated to his official portfolio as an Iberian affairs specialist. While each individual access might be rationalized, the sheer volume and thematic breadth of his inquiries, ranging from nuclear defense postures to Eastern European economic assessments, formed an undeniable pattern of systematic intelligence collection. By mid-May 1984, the circumstantial evidence against Clovis was compelling. Davidson's task force faced a critical decision. Without direct physical proof, a conventional arrest was legally challenging. However, the risk of allowing a gold source to continue operating outweighed these procedural difficulties. The decision was made to proceed with a direct confrontation, a calculated gamble that the weight of the evidence and the element of surprise would lead to a confession. Henri Clovis was arrested on May 25, 1984, within his own NATO office in Brussels. A joint team of Belgian counterintelligence officers and alliance military police entered his office without warning. The arrest unfolded without drama or resistance. Clovis, then 58, simply looked up from his desk, showed little emotion, and quietly complied with instructions. He was escorted from the building, his departure unnoticed by most of his bewildered colleagues. During the subsequent interrogations, Clovis confessed to everything with a disturbing calmness. Over several days, he meticulously detailed his methods of operation, describing the Minox camera, the dead drop locations in Amsterdam, Vienna, and Brussels, the coded correspondence, and the types of documents he had targeted. His precise account provided Western intelligence with invaluable insights into KGB tradecraft and the depth of the penetration. However, when questioned about his motivations, Clovis's narrative diverged radically from his interrogator's expectations. He expressed no remorse, instead presenting himself not as a traitor, but as a secret agent of peace. He genuinely believed his actions. By providing the Soviets with unparalleled visibility into NATO's capabilities and intentions, had averted potential miscalculations and escalations between the superpowers. He asserted he had sought stability through a balance of information, convinced that mutual understanding, however acquired, was preferable to blind paranoia. Psychologists later suggested Clovis had constructed a powerful internal narrative. a sophisticated rationalization allowing him to perceive his betrayal as a noble, albeit clandestine service to global stability. Finding a sense of importance his own society had denied him. In October 1984, Clovis's trial commenced in Belgium. It was held behind closed doors, with only a handful of accredited journalists permitted for select sessions. This secrecy was a strategic decision by Belgian authorities and NATO High Command to prevent further exposure of alliance vulnerabilities. Marcus van Doren, a 55-year-old Belgian military magistrate, presided over the proceedings. Clovis was found guilty of treason, espionage, and compromising state secrets, receiving a life sentence. He served 19 years at the military prison of Mechelen before dying in 2003 at the age of 77 due to heart complications. To his last breath, he never expressed remorse, consistently maintaining his self-conception as a misunderstood agent of peace. The consequences of Operation TOPAZ were far-reaching. NATO implemented massive revisions to its security protocols, introducing stricter compartmentalization, continuous electronic monitoring of access, and comprehensive psychological profiling for personnel handling sensitive information. The case exposed a fundamental vulnerability within the alliance's system of mutual trust. Even long-serving, seemingly loyal officers could be turned through sophisticated psychological manipulation rather than overt coercion or financial inducement. For the KGB, the loss of Topaz was a significant strategic blow. Yet, the 6 years of intelligence he provided profoundly shaped crucial Soviet decisions regarding nuclear posture during one of the most tense periods of the Cold War. Western analysts retrospectively estimated that Clovis's information allowed the Soviets to adjust their own military capabilities, potentially prolonging the nuclear balance of terror and reducing risks of catastrophic miscalculation. Herein lies the enduring moral paradox of Operation Topaz, a debate that continues to divide specialists in Cold War studies. Did Clovis, through his profound act of treason, inadvertently contribute to the strategic stability he claimed to seek by furnishing the Soviets with unprecedented visibility into NATO's capabilities? Some argue that better information, even illicitly obtained, reduces risks of accidental escalation. Others counter that unilateral espionage creates dangerous asymmetries, destabilizing the balance of power. What remains undisputed is the operational effectiveness of the KGB's approach, patiently cultivating an individual whose ideology, resentment, and need for validation could be exploited. Henry Clovis's legacy endures as a chilling study of human vulnerabilities no security system can completely eliminate. Henri Clovis, the quiet NATO officer whose life became a crucible of Cold War deception, ultimately faced his reckoning not with defiance, but with a chilling, almost detached calm. His confession laid bare 6 years of meticulous betrayal, detailing a network of dead drops and stolen secrets that reached the highest echelons of Western defense. The closed-door trial, orchestrated to contain the fallout, sealed his fate. A life sentence for treason, a judgment he accepted without remorse, convinced until his death in Mechelen prison that his actions served a purpose beyond the accusations. Yet, the legacy of Operation Topaz transcends the simple narrative of a spy caught in the act. It forces us to confront a disquieting moral paradox. Could one man's profound act of treason have inadvertently contributed to the very stability he claimed to seek? By providing the Soviet Union with unprecedented visibility into NATO's strategic capabilities, Clovis's intelligence may have, in the grim calculus of the Cold War, reduced the risks of catastrophic miscalculation, averting scenarios that could have escalated into global conflict. His story is a stark testament to the insidious power of psychological manipulation, where personal disillusionment and the yearning for significance can be artfully weaponized, turning an asset against its own alliance, not through coercion, but through a perversion of conviction. We are left to ponder the true cost of security and the complex interplay between loyalty and perceived purpose. In a world of shadows and shifting allegiances, where does conviction end and betrayal begin? What are your thoughts on Henry Clovis's claim of being a secret agent of peace? Do you believe his actions, despite being treasonous, could have inadvertently contributed to strategic stability during those tense years? Share your perspective in the comments below. To delve further into the labyrinthine world of Cold War espionage, explore another of our investigations into the forgotten narratives of betrayal and intrigue. And if this journey into the depths of human vulnerability and geopolitical tension resonated with you, ensure you subscribe to Black Protocol and leave a like on this video for more true stories from the archives of history.